Emily faced another ordeal. She came to the realization that she would not be able to fulfill her promise to give birth to John's child. Pregnancy was approaching the 6th week when severe abdominal pain suddenly appeared and bleeding began. John called an ambulance at the most difficult moment. On the way to the hospital, Emily realized that she had failed to save another pregnancy, and this was the 4th unsuccessful attempt. This realization brought the bitterness of disappointment. She realized that this was her last chance, and she probably wouldn't dare to try again. She felt the gravity of the situation, realizing her inability to give John offspring. This failure signified for her the fact that her dream of having her own child will remain unfulfilled for now. It was a hard, exhausting road, because every attempt was connected with hope and fear, and every failure increased disappointment. But Emily did not lose faith and hope. John witnessed the struggle and difficult moments, and felt guilty in front of Emily for her suffering and loss. It was awkward and difficult for him to face this difficult situation. He was afraid to express his feelings and experiences, avoiding eye contact, throwing a blanket over her sick stomach. Emily understood his difficulties and tried not to let disappointment in her husband's eyes. The woman realized how important this dream of a child was for her and John. She was torn between the desire to fulfill this promise and the fear of disappointing her husband. It seemed to Emily that the child would help them to get closer, to patch up that hole in the relationship, which became more and more noticeable over the years. The next day, John came to the hospital and looked at Emily in silence. There was an understanding of the complexity of this situation in his gaze. Despite all the difficulties and medical forecasts, perhaps it's worth taking a break, calm down and start living for yourself? John asked after the second failed attempt. Then Emily's pregnancy lasted up to the maximum period, 8 weeks. "I don't want to live just for myself. I want a real family," she replied. "I want you and me to have a child, so that we live not only for each other, but also for our baby." John pursed his lips in silence, as if he was already against Emily continuing her attempts. She, accustomed to achieving any set goals, was not going to back down. This fight was expensive. Next to the person she loved, her life was exhaustingly long, but it had everything she dreamed of, everything except, perhaps, the most important and missing detail, a child with John. Emily met John in town. She then came from the wilderness, tired of a poor life and a lack of everything she needed. And she was also tired of her tiring ex-husband, who not only reveled like 9% of the residents of their village, but also could not behave adequately with women. Emily hated him and the life they led. Therefore, after 3 years of living together, she ran away from her tormentor, realizing that there was no point in going to the district center, where there would be the same problematic situation with work and low salaries. The sequence of her actions led her to a big city, which struck her not only with its size, but also with a new way of life, eventful. On the very first evening, Emily wanted to escape back to her native wilderness, hide there from the crowd of people who seemed indifferent or, on the contrary, too aggressive. Gradually, she got used to her new life, got a job in a women's clothing store, rented a room after leaving the hostel, where she spent almost a month. She didn't want to go back to her previous life. Emily wanted something new, first of all money and comfort. She met John in a rather banal way via the internet, on the advice of her friend. She got on a dating site, and there he was. Of course, she was lucky, but there were also men who disappointed Emily with their actions and appearance. When she saw John, she realized that he was the man she deserved, and who was worthy of her. "Let's get married," he suggested after 6 months of dating. And Emily, who managed to get a certificate of divorce, immediately agreed. John was rich, worked in a good company, in a good position. He had a dizzying career growth. John also knew how to invest money skillfully. In addition to his main job, the man was engaged in investments in stocks and other financial instruments, which were not entirely clear to Emily, but brought significant income. She could afford not to work, doing comfort and cleaning in the house. The apartment in which she lived with her husband was huge, and Emily was used to doing everything herself, not allowing strangers to appear on the territory of her house. "Why do you refuse the services of a cleaner?" John wondered. "Personally, I have always invited cleaning specialists to maintain order in the apartment. It's impossible to clean such a large apartment." I prefer to do that, Emily replied. She did not tell her husband that a year ago she was washing dirty floors in her house and also cleaned the village store. For her, cleaning the apartment, even if it was so huge, was not hard work. On the contrary, it reminded her of the past, of the struggle she was overcoming. Artyom started talking about the baby about a year after they got married. Emily, of course, immediately rushed to fulfill her husband's request. And then the problems started. Doctors threw up their hands, not understanding why a physically healthy woman, who was not even 30 years old, could not bear a child in any way. She was constantly under the supervision of a doctor, but something was wrong, which is why every pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. Despite experiments and good doctors, none of Emily's pregnancies could be completed. I'm tired, honestly, she confessed to John the day he came to her hospital with a bouquet of flowers and tried not to look her in the eye. I give up. Now I'm ready to admit defeat. And I don't want to try anymore. I'm sorry. She wanted to cry from despair. It was almost 5 years of marriage, and there was no child. John nodded, continuing to look away, and sighed heavily. I understand you. I've already told you that maybe you should stop this torment. Now you've made that decision yourself, he said. Emily kept trying to figure out what would happen to their relationship now. While she was trying to get pregnant, while she was trying to carry a baby, she hoped that she and John would become closer to each other. But now, when both finally realized that there would be no more attempts, it became unclear whether their marriage would continue at all. John, what's going to happen now? She asked, and only now did she look at his face. There was uncertainty, even fear, in the man's eyes, and Emily became uneasy from what she saw. I don't know, he shrugged. Let's move on, I think. She nodded. On that day, she still hoped that they would really move on and do everything without a child. But it is unlikely that their marriage will last long. After all, John had no children, and she would not be able to give birth to them to him. But she didn't want to give up this life, which she had been used to for more than 5 years. She didn't want to think about what would happen now that she was risking being left alone. It is unlikely that such a man will appear in her life again. Handsome, smart, generous, kind. But Emily was ready for the end. That's probably why the woman wasn't surprised to see her husband with another girl. I just came to his work at lunchtime, and there I saw John, who was getting into another woman's car. Of course, one could assume that it was a colleague or acquaintance, but when Emily saw her husband kissing this woman on the lips, everything fell into place. I didn't want lies and dirt. On the contrary, I wanted to clarify the situation and stop living in lies. It is better to return to your village than to be deceived and turn a blind eye to it. She didn't want to struggle with her thoughts. Emily decided to talk to John. Yes, I have another one, he said. And, really, we have a child together. It was a low blow that Emily had never expected. I stared into John's face, trying to figure out if he was joking or if he was serious. Although, what kind of jokes are there? Do you have a child? She said with difficulty, moving her lips. And how old is he? Almost a year, he replied, counting down the time. It turned out that the child was conceived between Emily's second and third unsuccessful attempt to become a mother. While she was trying to give birth to her husband's child, another one gave birth to him. Why didn't you tell me anything? She asked with difficulty, holding back tears. I didn't think that everything would go so far. For me, you were all about hormone treatment, constantly talking about the baby. It was like living in hell. And John, what do you think it was like for me? Emily couldn't hold back her tears anymore. While I was trying to give birth to your child, while I was drinking and injecting myself with strong hormones, you were dating someone else. And this girl gave birth to your son. Do you realize how much health I've lost? But nothing can change, John said. Emily cried all night. John was sleeping on the couch in the living room, and it was obvious that this was the end. Emily was haunted by the thought that her husband behind her back actually had another family, a real one, in which there was both a woman and a child. She was ashamed, but ashamed not in front of her husband but in front of herself. In the morning she packed her things. John looked at his wife questioningly. Where are you going? I'm leaving you, Emily said. Indeed, there is no point in trying to glue and recreate something anymore. It's over. You can bring into your house the one who deserves it. Are you going to file for divorce or should I do it? Ludmilla shrugged her shoulders. As you wish, John. I'm sorry, but I'm late. She grabbed her suitcase, in which she put the most necessary things. Emily will take the rest later, when she has dealt with what has been bothering her for many years. She hardly slept on the train. Every now and then she went out into the vestibule to breathe, then returned back to her compartment, in which no one was traveling except her. There was a bus after the train. The ride on it was not easy and lasted a couple of hours. Tired, broken, and already not thinking clearly, Emily got out at her bus stop and stared at the sign with the name of the village, the place from which she escaped 6 years ago. Almost nothing has changed, except that it has become even more gloomy. Hey! Where are you going, beauty? Some guy drove up to Emily. I'm going to the Frolov family. Are there any others like that? The girl asked. There is a Baba Klava. She lives with her grandson. And who are you to them? Emily shrugged her shoulders. Will you take me to their house? I won't get there myself. I don't have the strength, and it's already dark. Emily sat down on the seat and put the suitcase in front of her. They spent 3 minutes on the road, after which she handed the guy a bill, and then easily jumped to the ground. The same leaning house, rotten fence, steps with holes. Nothing has changed except the dog, which barked deafeningly at the sight of a stranger. Emily didn't even have time to take a step towards the house, as Claudia Ivanovna appeared on the porch. When she saw Emily, she swayed and stared at the woman as if she had seen a ghost. What are you? The old lady asked. It's me. Let me in. Why did you come? Emily shook her head. I came to my son. Let me in. The driver told me that you live with your grandson. Claudia Ivanovna had already managed to recover and slowly descended from the porch. Let's say, what's it to you? For 6 years, you were not clear where, and as soon as Oliver died, you came right away. Don't be afraid. You want to sue his house. I won't let you. Oliver died? What is it? She asked. A long time ago, 2 months ago. And it's like you didn't know? I didn't know. Klava entered the house in silence, and Emily followed her. There was a table in the middle of the room, and behind it sat a boy of about 7 with the same blonde hair and green eyes as Emily. It was her son, her own son, whom Emily left with her husband Oliver 6 years ago, running away to the city. This is the son whom she abandoned and never visited over the years, tried to forget about his existence altogether. He was looking at a beautiful woman who had come from the city, as if Emily had flown from another planet. For him, she was nobody, but at the same time she was everything at once, the only one, after her father and grandmother, the closest. Should I call you Mom? Alex asked timidly, getting up from the table and walking over to Emily. She hesitantly touched his hair, and something inside turned over from this unknown feeling to her. How do you like this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Love you.